Who's calling? Hello? Hello, Mr. Dayo. Can you send me a video on how to do a podcast, a free podcast with my phone? No.
Okay.
But yes,
Like
right now.
I can actually record one for you.
Right now and send to you.
Okay.
I'll do that right about now.
Thank you very much.
Let's talk about how to start a free podcast from your phone in just 5 minutes. The first thing you need to consider before you record your podcast is your focus, the focus of the podcast, what is commonly referred to as a niche. What niche do you want to play in? And there are two ways to actually create a niche for yourself. You can either create a niche by the service you provide, or you create a niche by the industry you want to play in. Now, if you want a more advanced method on finding a niche or finding a loophole in the market so that you can use your niche to actually solve that, you can actually check the description below for one of our free courses that you can actually take on how to start a podcast. It's going to actually walk you through the details of many of the things that I'm actually walking you through here right about now. Once you figure out your niche, the next thing you want to figure out is what is going to be your strategy. There are two things to consider when it comes to strategy for a podcast. The first is going to be content strategy. The second is going to be branding strategy. And I'm going to start with branding strategy. Branding strategy means that how are you going to separate yourself from every other podcast that exists using your branding. So for example, we currently have a branding at Audacity2Lead that we consistently use, and that comes in form of font type, colors, and style of design that we currently use. And that's because we also do a lot of designs at Audacity2Lead. We also produce a lot of visual materials for clients at Audacity2Lead. So you need to, first of all, create the branding. Then you need to consider the content strategy. What's going to be your content strategy? And by content strategy, I mean, how is your podcast going to be providing content differently from every other person who has a podcast in the marketplace? Of course, as right now, there are about 800,000 podcasts active on iTunes, which means that there's still a lot of play field for you. But because there are a lot of podcasts, you need to also find a way to separate yourself from the rest of the pack. So you need to consider first your content strategy, second, your branding strategy. Now, once you can figure that out, you are going to be ready to go. And so the third thing you want to consider is your frequency. How frequent are you going to be releasing a podcast? Are you going to be releasing a podcast every week, or are you going to be releasing a podcast maybe twice a week or maybe once a month? You need to select a frequency. And the reason why I'm saying that is because even with the 800,000 podcasts that are active on iTunes, there are quite a large number that have not released podcasts in the last 7 days, in the last 30 days. So you need to select a frequency that you can maintain. Okay, Mr. Dayo, I have heard you. JB is for me to have a focus, to come up with a strategy and then to come up with a frequency. Now, just tell me, how do I actually record the podcast? Okay, so right about now, let's talk about how to actually create the podcast in just 5 minutes. And I'm going to switch to showing you exactly how to do that in just 5 minutes. So let's get into that, right? Yeah, good guy. Now to start a free podcast on my phone, because I want to really start a podcast. First thing you want to do is to install an app called Anchor. So this is Anchor. Let's open Anchor right now. So this is Anchor. Says the easiest way to make a podcast ever. Well, that's true. It's easy. It says continue with Google, the account you want to use. Then it says, hey there, what brings you to Anchor? Tell me more about podcasts. I have a podcast I want to import. I want to listen to podcasts. Now, you remember that here, what I want to do is I want to make a podcast. So to record, you need a microphone. Luckily, you're already holding a great one. Enable microphone access. Allow. Then it says all set. Let's make your trailer. Here an example. So I'm going to disconnect this in order to play an example of a trailer.
Mystery meat, tater tots, those tiny wrapped cheeses with the wax from Simple Brown Paper.
So with that, what the trailer means is something that gives a quick snapshot into what the podcast is going to be about. Now, if you have covered the aspect of focus, your strategy, and your frequency, this is where this now plays out, because this is where you now reel it out to the person who's going to listen to your show. Since I don't know what to actually say on the show, that is, I don't know what to capture in the trailer, I'm actually going to go ahead and first of all write down something that allows me to put together my thought. So I'm going to go ahead and write what I want to write. So in this case, since I've already figured that out, I'm going to go ahead and record mine here. Hello and welcome to Audacity2Lead podcast. If you're new here, this is the show where we give you the courage and the necessary insights to lead with more influence. While we cover business and marketing for service businesses, our core mission is to help you distill your wisdom and knowledge and expertise into profitable intellectual property, distribute it using media at your tips, and deliver your message and passion mission powerfully in the world. If that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe, and we'll be having it. So it looks like I spoke too much and too long, so I'm going to kind of repeat that all over again. So let's go ahead and start everything all over again. So here's a quick pro tip. If you want to record an audio on your podcast and get clean sound that does not produce any plosives, what's called PO, P, B, D, and sounds like that. Naturally, if you're speaking to your phone and you're trying to record words that have P, B, D, and things like that, they will naturally produce a lot of air. What you can simply do is basically just to use an handkerchief and cover your mic. So if your mic is either here or here, just look for exactly where your mic is. In the case of this phone, the mic is down here. So what you do is just cover it up, and then you just go ahead and speak to it. This is going to naturally take out the plosives. Take that. Hello and welcome to Audacity2Lead podcast. If you're new here, this is the show where we give you the courage and the necessary insights you need to lead with more influence. Now I'm going to use the suspenseful sound. Okay, so that's the one that I'm using, your podcast name. I'm going to use my podcast name. I'm going to remove this from my name, and I'm going to use Audacity2Lead. So I usually like to call it Courage and Insight. Okay, so that's that. Anchor.fm/Audacity2Lead, and the show's name is Audacity2Lead. So I think with this, we are good to, yes, this podcast description now. I didn't think of this earlier on. So before you actually get started, it's better to actually start with a podcast description. So where we give you the in the world. Use this description. It says choose your cover art. Okay, now this is where you upload an image. So I'm going to choose existing photo, allow, and then I'm going to go to, okay, cool. Here we go. So I'm going to choose done. Choose category, business and marketing. So it's business and marketing. Woo, this will publish your trailer and make your podcast available on all platforms. Okay, so something very interesting just happened. I have done all the recording and set up all my show, and I just found out that because I was recording with this phone and as well doing the podcast with the phone at the same time, there was no audio recorded for the podcast. So I'm going to go ahead and do that separately. But you can see that that's basically how to do it. Having set up Anchor properly now, I want to actually play the trailer for you so that you can hear. Hello and welcome to Audacity2Lead podcast. If you're new here, this is the show where we give you the courage and necessary insight to lead with more influence. While we cover business. But Mr. Dayo, you didn't release your own podcast now. Why? Is there any reason? Okay, so first thing that I would like to let you know is that when you are starting out your podcast like this, I usually don't recommend that you launch with just one episode. It's best to have a trailer and perhaps maybe a single episode or maybe 2 episodes. Typically, it's recommended that you have 3 episodes so that people can actually listen to maybe 1, 2, 3 and have a feel of where the direction of the podcast is headed before they actually go ahead and subscribe. Now after I've recorded my trailer, I'm not going to publish yet, which is why I selected don't publish that. I will do that later. I get you now. Thank you very much for that one. Okay, thank you. Now, if you really want to take your podcasts a notch higher compared to what I've actually shared with you here, we have a free podcast course that you can actually take over at Audacity2Lead.com/join, and you can actually find the link in the description down below so that you can actually take it. It's going to show you even a lot more detail on how to create your content strategy, on how to actually create a niche for yourself. More importantly, it's going to actually show you how to actually take your podcast from your phone and edit it and produce a really powerful show. If that's something that's interesting to you, check the description down below and you'll be on your way. With that said, thank you very, very much for watching. I am Dyer Samuel. I'll see you next time.